telling the universe about a breed of dog called a Cocker Spaniel. We have never heard such a tale of evil and intrigue.
Ah, God damn it, Donut.
I am telling the truth that needs to be told, Carl.
Carl, you and Donut find a safe room. We've got a Dark and Darker recap show. Hello everyone and welcome. Last week was a rough, busy week for Dark and Darker and Iron Mace. We have a bunch of news regarding their lawsuits, their deplatforming from the Epic Games Store, the end of Dark and Darker Mobile, and finally the publicity team at Iron Mace did a 2-hour yap fest to boot, so we have a lot to unpack. In this video, we are going to go through the points raised in that 2-hour unstructured press conference, and I'll end this video with my take on Wipe 5 and how I think things are looking moving into Wipe 6. So let's jump right in with some of the good news and get the boring legal stuff out of the way. Terry, the CEO at Iron Mace, assures us that regardless of the outcome of these various lawsuits, Iron Mace is in no danger of ceasing operations. Even though they have been ordered to pay Nexon north of $6 million while awaiting their appeal, Iron Mace feels like they have a big enough war chest to endure any judgment that Nexon is awarded. The detail here is that Iron Mace was found by Korean courts to be non-infringing on Nexon's copyrighted IP. They have been found to have been unjustly enriched from Nexon's trade secrets, or in layman's terms, the processes and knowledges and techniques that the team gained in their employment at Nexon. It is this theft of trade secrets which is the underpinnings for these fines. And it's important to note that Nexon isn't happy with this judgment either. They want more than $6 million, because of course they do. Bullies have never been content with what they get, so they'll be coming back for more pounds of flesh, and of course SDF is still personally facing what sounds like criminal charges akin to corporate espionage. In the background to all of this, we've been told that Dark and Darker will no longer be available on the Epic Games Store. Iron Mace has passed this off as a byproduct of their ongoing lawsuits, and it sounds like they may not even understand why they're being deplatformed. But regardless, if you are using the Epic Games Store launcher for Dark and Darker, you will need to migrate your account to Iron Mace's Blacksmith launcher. In the end, Epic Games Store is rather shit, and remember that Tencent is a 40% shareholder in Epic, so do your shopping on Steam. Don't support Chinese oligarchs pretending to communist values when our oligarchs here at home, pretending to free market values, need your business more. I'm just kidding. Gabe is actually a paragon of virtue in the cesspool of executives trying to ruin modern online gaming. But I'm not completely kidding. Epic Games Store is shit. Only go there to get free games because, fuck Epic Games Store. In the last bit of legal stuff, Dark and Darker Mobile is over. Iron Mace was not the team developing this game. Their partner, Krafton, was. Iron Mace had licensed their branding to Krafton, and while I don't know the specifics of the agreement between them, there was likely a fee structure for the use of the Dark and Darker brand and a revenue sharing agreement with the hopes that each of these games' independent successes would drive new players to the other. This agreement likely allowed either party to exit the agreement at any time. What we do know for certain is that the mobile game creators Krafton chose to break away from Dark and Darker, and it's not really hard to guess why. Firstly, the games were already divergent in very major ways, and had little to do with one another besides a few shared assets. Secondly, I doubt Krafton wanted to pay for the rights to use Dark and Darker branding any longer, when it was failing to deliver them any value, setting aside any bad reputation from all of the Nexon legal bullying on their home turf in Korea. In last week's press conference, Terry, the CEO of Iron Mace, the one seated to right of Frame, and the one speaking English, spent a first hour talking through these legal updates and assuring us that Dark and Darker would continue. He also spent a fair bit of time tiptoeing around their internal organizational issues and corporate dysfunction. His discussion of these topics were meandering and filled with soft corporate speech, so I'm doing a fair bit of paraphrasing here, but here are my takeaways. SDF has been distracted and micromanaging, bottlenecking overall development and company operations, and his responsibilities are being refocused and narrowed. From an editorial perspective, this is Corpo speak for slowly reducing his responsibilities until this is no longer a problem, and to my mind, this is the best single piece of news to come out of last week's press conference. Additionally, Terry made several references several times to a new unnamed senior game designer, who presumably will be picking up where SDF is leaving off on many of these responsibilities. But that's enough of the boring legal stuff. Let's talk about some of the big picture changes coming to the game itself. They think that they've found the bug which has allowed for bunny hopping to increase character movement speed in the dungeon. In a game which is essentially distilled down to running towards or running away from your opponent, this is really great news. Editorial perspective here, but it was a silly and toxic thing in the game that lasted way too long without being addressed, and the fact that SDF was able to solve it in 4 hours is like a face slap to these customers who have been complaining about this forever. Anyway, moving on. Iron Mace has fixed the quick swap bug, which allowed over-caffeinated players to open their character sheet in the middle of combat and manually switch slot 1 and slot 2 weapons to essentially animation cancel the swap. I think this bug has been around for the better part of a year. I mean, nice job, team. Despite the claim that fixing the blocking bugs are a high-priority development item, we have no update nor ETA on when these bugs will be fixed. The only update the team gave was that fixing this bug is hard. The team at Iron Mace is working hard on a new spectator feature for the arena system. In a step clearly aimed at creating more of an esports angle for their arena system, their hopes is that we'll be watching arena matches with high-performing players. From my point of view, I don't care at all about the arena system, and I'm not sure why this is a development priority at all. If arenas are so popular, why is it only live on the weekends? Like, if this is a real popular facet for your product, why isn't it live all the time? I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Terry and team teased an update about the next big project the teams at Iron Mace are working on, and that is public spaces and guild halls. The vision here is that we can have our own social spaces, decorate them as we see fit, and spend time hanging out with friends and with strangers. This will be a paid feature that we'll have to pay a monthly premium to host these social spaces with Iron Mace. He did not give us any pricing at this time, nor did he say that they would be selling custom skins and cosmetics for us to use to decorate these social spaces, but it seems very likely to me that the primary driver and timing of these social spaces is to sell us more cosmetics via microtransactions, which is fine, I guess, if it's not pay to win. Knock yourselves out, you dark and darker whales. I do question the allocation of dev resources away from working on the core gameplay loop, but I guess you guys have legal bills to pay, so longtime viewers know I don't really care about cosmetics at all, but I know tons of you do. I'm looking at you, Jadrian, and if you love cosmetics, you've got a lot to look forward to. In the last bit of good news from the press conference, Iron Mace is considering disabling trade at the start of next wipe, at least for the first few weeks. That means turning off the marketplace and turning off the trade channel. This might be the closest we ever get to the dream of solo, self-found, and dark and darker. I love this. I love the fact that it will cause a major disruption in real money trading. I love that they are giving this a shot. In this turtle's opinion, shopping on the marketplace and assembling gear is the worst part of dark and darker. This change will simultaneously refocus the player base on exploration and gear hunting and reduce the silly wastes of time outside of the dungeon, but it will also greatly shift how we perceive value in the gear that we win or find on our adventures. Fingers crossed they actually go through with this, because they left specifics up in the air. Now, as you've likely already heard, Iron Mace and SDF are very disappointed in the number of players who play High Roller as their primary game mode. They say it's roughly 50%. So their solution is to make High Roller more hardcore. Because, of course it is. This will be executed in 2 phases. In the first phase, which is live now, High Roller will lose access to the Goblin's Gear recovery service. The Battle Royale Circle mechanic has returned, slowly forcing players to a central point on the map. Less exit portals will be available, less static extracts will spawn. The exit portals which do spawn will follow the old school semi-random distribution. In the next phase of making High Roller more hardcore, likely the timing of which will be the start of next wipe, solo and duo queues will be removed. If you like to play High Roller as a solo player, well, prepare to play against duos and trios. More players and the sweatiness of High Roller trios will be the only game mode available to you. Down portals will likely have an added interaction time to stop down portals from being preferred camping spots or easy means of escape. We're going to take a hard left into editorial Koopa time. This is such a classic SDF move. He is clearly frustrated that more players don't share his game taste, so he's going to punish everyone who disagrees with that design perspective until we are all collectively in awe of the brilliance of his vision. This wipe, he attempted to ruin normal game modes, so players would play more HR. And when that backfired, well, now it's time to punish the other half of the playing population. Despite High Roller Trios being the least popular game mode, he wants to remake all High Roller games into its image, without any examination or discussion of what factors drive that low player engagement. They say that violence is cyclical, and the irony here is not lost on me. Nexon bullies Iron Mace, punching down at a scrappy startup until they get what they want or until Iron Mace are annihilated. SDF punches down at the people who love his creation until they praise him and love not only that product, but love it on his terms. It is clear to me now that he would rather see his own creation fail than to accept a vision for it that's greater than his own. I'd like to be very clear. SDF, you feckless clown. No one ever in the history of this game stopped playing Dark and Darker because it was too casual or too new player friendly. There is not a huge population of potential customers who are holding off on buying Dark and Darker because it was not hardcore enough. You don't need to experiment in this direction. You can simply survey the hundreds of thousands of former Dark and Darker players about where they went and why they left. Course correct from there. Time for a hard right turn back into friendlier territory. I do want to pause a moment and shower praise upon the designers or the teams at Iron Mace who are doing some of the best work, and that is, frankly, the aesthetics team. Whoever is doing the level design, the module development, the refactoring of old modules and the creations of new ones, you are doing, hands down, the best work at the company. This patch has brought new modules across many map levels and the dynamic layouts to boot. Now this is hard work to tessellate these maps, and the care and attention to detail is the highest quality work we have ever seen from Iron Mace. The use of verticality, the reduction of cheese spots, the technical work to get all of these modules to plug in well together. It's great work. Well done. The Ruins has never felt more like a long-abandoned castle ruin. Aesthetically, it's perfect. The models and the art continue to elevate this product, even while the game design, the balance, and the overall direction continue a downward trajectory. Also, a big shout out to Odin during his press conference. He was the only one who seemingly came prepared to that press conference. I mean, like a professional. SDF just sat there looking defensive and sullen and answering the occasional question. Terry, you came across as both unprepared and not in the details about things that were going on in your own development pipeline. Odin, my advice to you is you've got to have those guys do a dress rehearsal or work from notes or something. I mean, it is physically painful to listen to 2 hours of unstructured rambling, but I salute you for coming, showing up prepared, and attempting to bring structure to what was otherwise an unstructured, meandering mess. So in closing, I'll answer the question I get most frequently on my Discord, and the question is, Koopa, how is Dark and Darker in Wipe 5, and should I come back now or wait until next wipe? You all know I love this game, and I want it to succeed, and in the past, I've been fairly measured in my criticism. The game has a lot of highs and lows over the last 2 years, and I've always tried to be optimistic. Here's the short answer. I think Wipe 5 has produced the worst version of Dark and Darker. The cheapest, most low-stakes, and arcadey version of the game that we've seen to date, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So my short answer is no. If you were thinking of coming back, your memories and your nostalgia for what it was will likely be better than what you find in Wipe 5, and maybe even Wipe 6. When this game debuted in playtests 2 years ago, it was advertised as a PvEVP dungeon crawler that you could play with your mates. It was a fresh and exciting and melee-focused game. Sure, it was a bit unpolished and janky, but you could squint your eyes and see its potential in whatever context you liked best. For some of us, it was exploration and treasure. For others, it was a storytelling or narrative engine with players like Asymmetrical Soul, playing a bard and singing about troll bosses in the goblin caves to entertain other players and create stories which arose from zany gameplay. For others, it was about murder hoboing. Each big game release has introduced a larger emphasis on ranged gameplay, diluting that melee experience. Each new class has ushered in endless performative balance changes, all to try and cover up and hide the underlying simplicity of the combat system and the low levels of sophistication in the PvE. Wipe 5 really brought all of this together in the continuous dungeon experience, which, as I said before, is a good idea poorly executed. The way this system is tuned is to the point that all maps are arena maps, with constant graveyard zerging levels of PvP. Third, fourth, and fifth party nonsense. These things combined suck all the creative oxygen out of the room, leaving no room for anything but sociopathic murder hoboing. Let me be very clear with you. Exploring modules in Dark and Darker is what Prey does. Opening chests is what Prey does. Fighting PvE is what Prey does. The natural result of these long-term shifts in foundational elements of the game is making the game and the community worse, and if you can believe it, more toxic. A year ago, it would be noteworthy if a defeated player used racial slurs or other incendiary language during or after a defeat in PvP. The stakes have never been lower than they are today, but I'm being told to kill myself, or worse, every session I play, and I'm called everything but a saint. Lots of people will happily tell you why Dark and Darker was a better game during the playtests, despite the jank, despite the limited polish, the limited class selection, and the limited maps. A lot of that is nostalgia, but some of it is a direct rebuttal to the game's long-term shifts in direction, towards maximum sweat, towards edgelord levels of hardcore, and the abandonment of any semblance of this being a PvEVP dungeon crawl experience. Dark and Darker aesthetically has never looked better, but it's an inch deep and a mile wide. Don't get me wrong, I like what the team at Iron Mace is doing in the abstract. They are thinking about their past high points, their successes, and using those high water marks to develop a plan to move forward. But if your takeaway from that reflection was that modern Dark and Darker is too casual, you have completely lost the plot and missed your market. Making the game more hardcore is the answer to a question no one is asking. The future, if you stay this preposterous course, is a niche, janky, first-person shooter. It will fail in reach, it will fail in player retention, and in revenue. From a player perspective, should they stay this course, I would expect server and region closures, a continuing decline in active players, and in Twitch viewership, and increasingly predatory monetization to fund this currently myopic vision. I wish I had a better outlook, team. I wish I had more cause for optimism. All the parts, all the pieces are right there. They're just waiting to be assembled into a game that can be enjoyed in more than one way. Until next time, Koopa out.
He has an erection, Mordecai. It's very inappropriate. Mongo is appalled.